Thank you for this performative opening of today and of this panel. So welcome back. Welcome back to Shifting Paradigms, a symposium on research in the sciences and in the arts that started yesterday. So after a tour through the exhibition Fellow Travelers at ZKM yesterday and first opening panel on the notions and state or processes of polycrisis with Monica Narula's wonderful multimedia lecture and a discussion revolving around methodologies and ways to act in a situation in which much is uncertain and in radical danger. We will now continue with a panel titled Research Matters. This panel aims to discuss research methodologies in the arts and humanities by presenting several approaches to the materiality of media and to matter in its radical existence at the threshold to the visible. Contemporary scientific, industrial, and social cultures will be addressed, which process matter, and at the same time sometimes offer broader understandings of materialities. The ocular instruments, codes, and laboratories involved will come into view through the lens of artistic research later on in the panel. But we will first hear a lecture by Bernadette Bensaude-Vincent. Then we will have research reports by artists Susanne Kriemann and Armin Linke. And finally, Tina Lorenz, head of the ZKM Hertzlab, will speak about the present and future of the lab. And of course, we will have room for discussions of each contribution together. So I'm very pleased to welcome Bernadette Bensaude-Vincent. Many thanks for coming to Karlsruhe today. She's Professor Emeritus at the University of Paris, Panthéon-Sorbonne, and also a member of the French Academy of Technologie. Her work as a historian and philosopher of science and of technology has focused on the history and philosophy of chemistry, of material science, and nanotechnology. She's often also addressed these sciences in the light of the ongoing crises, especially the environmental, climate crises. Just to name a few of her many publications, her book, The Chemistry, the Impure Science, has been published in 2012. Temps paysage pour une écologie de crise is another book published 2021. And she's also the editor of Biographies of Material Between Nature and Society that appeared 2022. Her work has received numerous awards. Most recently, this fall, she was declared winner of the 2024 Franklin Lavoisier Prize. So she was honored again for her contributions to the history and philosophy of chemistry. And I think there will be links between our last panel yesterday and your speech today, as you will speak about the sciences again in a moment of environmental challenge and also in view of the pollution produced. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to share a few ideas about materiality. Maybe I will start by framing the kind of research I'm conducting. As a philosopher, unfortunately, I have no real practice of materials, and it's only intellectual speculation, so I really expect a lot from our interchanges. And so what I've been trying to do is to refocus, as a philosopher, to refocus the attention around objects, and not just objects, but the materials they are made of. And I consider materials not just as physical, chemical entities made of atoms and molecules with individual properties. This is what materials science and engineers study. But we look at them as hybrids of nature and society. I mean that materials are both natural entities and socio-historical actors. Materials such as metals, for instance, participated in the long process of humans' domestication of the world and adaptation to the environment. If you remember, prehistorians divided the epochs of prehistory according to the materials in use. For instance, it's Bronze Age, Copper Age, Iron Age. So we define humanity according to its relations with materials. And this is really key to me. In the historical times, materials contributed to the domination and emancipation of humans from nature, and they were key actors in the process of colonization of the so-called New World. It was the rush to gold and silver. The uneven geographical distribution of raw materials that can be extracted and exploited for our socio-technical purposes is today a major geopolitical problem. You know that there is a big competition for strategic materials between China and Russia and the West. So my aim is really to shift from the paradigm of materials as resources for humans to materials as companion substances or partners of our technological adventures. And today, I would like to focus on two materials, nuclear waste and plastics. Because I will try, and this is a work in progress, you know, I just share with you, it's informal. I would like to characterize them as world objects. What do I mean by world objects? I borrowed this notion from my mentor, who was Michel Serres, who was also Bruno Latour's mentor, to a certain extent. And this French philosopher introduced the notion of world objects in 1973 in a paper entitled La Thanatocratie, meaning the government of death. You know? And it was inspired, this paper was inspired by nuclear bomb and Hiroshima, and he argued that technology was deeply connected to death and had always been connected to death. And this is really what I'm trying to tease today. And later, Serres gave this definition of world object. I read it. World objects are tools, one of whose dimensions is incommensurable with one of the dimensions of the world. For instance, a satellite for speed, an atomic bomb for energy, the internet for space, nuclear waste for time. The global or world dimension that characterizes world objects does away with the distance between us and them that once defined our objects. We live in these new objects as if in the world. So it means they are world objects because they become the Umwelt we live in today. You know, objects are, we live in a world of world objects. And they are, of course, technical objects, not all of them. This is what I'm trying. So world objects are defined by Serre in stark contrast to what he called quasi-objects. Quasi-objects or quasi-subjects, it's a notion that Bruno Latour took up in Nous n'avons jamais été modernes, we have never been modern. And quasi-objects are objects that are half objects and subjects. You know? Serre took the example of the rugby ball. The rugby ball is passed between the players. And the rugby ball is a quasi-object. Because what matters is not the physical materials of the ball, whether it's from leather or from plastic. It's that it's through its circulation, it constitutes collective. It constitutes the rules of the game. It constitutes society. So the key idea behind it is that the social contract relies on the circulation of quasi-objects. We make society only because of our relation with objects, and objects are quasi-objects and subjects. And the key notion attached to that is that objects are local. It's because they circulate within a place, within a perimeter, that they can make a collective. And the problem which comes with world objects is that they belong nowhere. They are no longer attached to a locality. And because of that, world objects, because of their global dimension, they are out of control. Serre insists that we depend on them more than they depend on us. They are completely out of control. This is Serre's definition of the Anthropocene. We depend on what we depended on us. And this is really for him key. And unlike ordinary objects, world objects are not local. They belong nowhere. They make a continuous, uniform space, meaning that there is no possible distanciation between them and us, and we are immersed in them. They are our habitat. World objects being ubiquitous are obstacles to the co-emergence and co-evolution of society and technology. They really threaten this co-production of society and technology. And this is what I would like to work on today. Because this definition that Serre gave, in my view, is very abstract. Yeah? And it's difficult to understand what he means. So what I would like to do is try to look at the materiality of these world objects and to look at what is based in their materiality and how is it that objects can become world objects. And so my aim is really to understand this through two case studies. The paradigmatic example is nuclear waste. And it happens that I am a member of the ethics committee of the French Agency for radioactive waste. And because of that, I've been working a lot on nuclear technology and especially on the production of nuclear waste. And you know that nuclear wastes are usually characterized by their level of activity, radioactivity, and their lifetime. For instance, plutonium,
339, which is the fissile plutonium used for bombs, for making bombs, has a half-life of 2420 years. Half-life. You know? And because of their activity, such materials organize the complexity of the world through their potential of harms and injuries. They are very dangerous. And because of their longevity, they are expanding in the collective future. We don't know what will happen with them in 100,000 years. So it's really a planetary explosion. And all beings on the planet in the 20th century live in the fallout of the 20th century nuclear bombs, nuclear tests, nuclear accidents, and aging nuclear reactors. Whether you no longer want to have nuclear technology in Germany, you are exposed. That's the point, whatever the choice of your country. So I talk of nuclear waste because I recently had the chance, as a member of the ethics committee of ANDRA, to have an in-depth visit of the French nuclear site of La Hague in Cotentin, which is in Normandy, where used nuclear fuel are reprocessed and stored. I had the strange feeling that everything on the site was meant to convince people that there is no such thing as world objects. If you look at the website of La Hague, it's an exemplary socio-technical system treating a normal technological object through a sequence of modules of units of operation. It's really a modernist utopia that deliberately ignores the stages of world objects. First remark, the notion of nuclear waste is absent from the website. La Hague is defined as a plant for treating and recycling spent fuel, although hundreds of tons of waste come to La Hague every year, and there is no recycling on the site. So it's a pure lie. La Hague is above all described as a chemical plant, separating, recovering, and reconditioning the different materials constituting the fuel. The amount of waste is systematically minimized thanks to the official terminology distinguish between radioactive matters, which is the materials that can be reused, mainly 1% of plutonium and 90% of uranium. And what they call waste is the ultimate residues that are only 4% of the incoming materials. The reusable materials are then shipped to other Orano sites to be manufactured and reprocessed as new fuel. So the idea of a closed cycle is still prevailing. It's the prevailing rhetorics among the French nuclear lobby, French and nuclear engineers and policymakers. They maintain the fiction of a closed cycle, although the recycled fuel will end up as ultimate waste after being reused. And the site of La Hague itself is a producer of waste, since the earlier units built in the 1960s are already decommissioned and are going to be dismantled. So we are continuously producing nuclear waste. The architecture of the site itself is a denial of the existence of world objects. The used fuel are strictly contained in a special locality with a surrounded by a triple barrier made of wall, electric fences, bound wires, and numerous checkpoints. The plant, which spread over 300 hectares, is clearly separated from the world we live in. It's a kind of island of technosphere, completely separated from the biosphere. So there is a clear distance between objects and subjects. The buildings are almost deserted by humans and crowded with a fleet of robots. All operations are performed remotely using specialized robots and remote manipulators. Far from being out of control, the site is under strict control and surveillance 24 hours over 24, all year long. There is even an on-site fire brigade. So it's really under control. Far from dismantling the social collective, the plant creates a disciplined collective. More than 1,000 employees follow strict rules and habits. The complex management of highly dangerous materials is described as a routine sequence of slow operation on a spaceful journey. Upon arrival, the pencils, they are called pencils, they are big columns of fused fuels, surrounded, protected by what they call cask. That is 110 metric ton steel containers that allow them to be shipped safely to La Hague. The fuel is cooled by taking a bath in a pool. This is their language. The fuel takes a bath in a pool. I use their language. From an average of 5 years. After this first bath, the fuel is cut up into small pieces for its second bath in a nitric acid solution to dissolve in nuclear material. And the recyclable material will be separated from the non-recyclable material and waste in a chemical facility. At the end of this operation, 96% of the material is going to be reused. Everything is fine. What do you complain about? Okay? We have everything in control. It's a complete denial of the existence of world object. And the agent who led us through the various units of the site conveyed a strong message of mastery and normality. At the end of the day, I was overwhelmed by the impression that it was a fiction of normality. A fiction. I was in a utopia, it was a fiction. It was a Disneyland. No. And I was happy, to realize then that I shared this impression with a French novelist, Maëlys de Kerangal, who wrote the foreword of the catalogue, where you also contributed the L'Âge Atomique, which is a current exhibition in Paris on nuclear physics. So my immersion in this fictitious world of normal technological objects conveyed quite a different message. And I think it really enriched my understanding of world objects. My first impression was surprise. La Hague is above all a chemical plant. I realized when I was there that nuclear waste are also chemicals. And we tend to forget that. And as radioactive materials, they have a kind of, autistic mode of existence. Why? Because their lifetime is strictly determined by the laws of nuclear physics. and they are completely indifferent to the surroundings. But as chemicals, they are always reacting to neighbor materials. They are highly reactive. And so they have a dual mode of existence. And it's important because in Lahain you have many other chemical elements. And so it's important. And during the visit I also had the strong feeling that I was in an intensive care unit. You know? It may be some paradoxical, you know, because normally in intensive care unit in hospitals, the patients are taken care because they are near to death. And in this case, the patients are very active. They are highly active, and that's because they are very active, and that because they carry danger of death, that we take care of them. Nevertheless, we have to take care of them. It's a question of life or death. So they create a collective because they are extremely active and because they are a potential harm. And they impose, because they are very active, and this is my third impression, they impose their own temporality. I mean, they take a 5-year bath when they come. Then they will have another bath in a pool for 10 years to cool down. And after this 10-year bath to cool down, they will go in another unit, highly ventilated unit, for another 5 years to cool down again. And when they are sufficiently cooled down, the cask, the containers, the metallic containers, will be crushed down and will be reused. And then they will be stored in another unit until the new other site in Lorenz, in Bure, will bury them 500 meters of the ground for eternity. But they will stay here. So they impose their own temporality. And the agent who led us through the visits, they say, well, you see here, everything goes to atomic pace. Atomic pace means slow. We live in a society which is always acceleration and rushing, but atoms impose to us their own temporality. And to me, this is important. Finally, I was overpowered by the oppressive feeling that I was walking through a prison, enclosed behind faces and many doors, in the midst of a soft green landscape and the seashore. The presence of death took over my mind through various very concrete details. First, every room is like a grave, isolated by thick walls, pierced through by a few portholes. Every room is silent, still, desert. The few humans allowed in the various rooms wear a special white costume with a helmet and check Geiger counters at the entrance and the exit. In all over the place, there is not a single coffee machine. And for me, coffee machine is the symbol of social life. And when there is no coffee machine, there is no society. The second impression is that this is not even simply a grave, a cemetery, it's even a slaughterhouse. This impression came to me in the last unit, which is called the crushing unit, where the casks, the containers, are crushed down under an enormous press. and they end up, they make what they call a galette. They have a special terminology which I like. A galette, you know, galette is a cookie. And this galette, which is 80 centimeters, when the press, the gigantic press came on them, they make a sound. This is the only sound that I could hear through the visit of the day. It's a very faint sound because of the thick walls, but you hear like a cry. And the technicians, they call that the cries of casque, le pleur des coqs. So it's like animals in the slaughterhouse, you know. And if you have a look, you can see that on the website. Look at the galette of this cask. They are very, very nice. They are a composite of various metals used, special metals and alloys used as containers. And they are really artistic materials. So, and they are like living animals. They have been slaughtered. So that is my reflection, you know. So my reflection is that since 1945, we have generated world objects that can look like familiar technological objects. They are disguised as familiar technological objects that we can master, that we can control. And we are so addicted to cheap electricity that the nuclear world has been normalized, trivialized, and look like an habitable world. It's like we would have been we have tamed radionuclides, or we think we have tamed, because I'm not sure we have really tamed, but we want to think that we have tamed radionuclides like wild animals and turn them into docile pets, companions for a few decades. But they have their own life. They have their own activity, and we deny it. So we may not be climato-deniers, but we deny the materiality of the technological objects. And this leads me to say a few words about plastic. What do I define plastic commodities as world objects? Of course, they are not as dangerous as radionuclides and nuclear waste, but they are no longer attached to localities. They have colonized the planet. We live in a plasticized world. We have collectively dumped phenomenal quantities of plastic into the environment, and we continue to do so. Over time, these plastics degrade in the soil, in the water, in the oceans, in the atmosphere. The result is that today, in Europe as in Asia, vegetables and fruit contain microplastics even before they are packaged. Another notable consequence is that all water that we drink have been contaminated, both tap water and bottled water. So despite the recent effort to recycle plastic bottles and plastic items, they have all been washed into streams and rivers on their way to the ocean. And plastic waste make up a soup of tiny plastic debris suspended in the surface water. So they became world objects because of their materiality. The mode, and again, they have this dual mode of existence. Their mode of existence as materials, as plastic, as carbon chains, is divorced for their social mode of existence as commodities that we can buy in the supermarket. Okay? And we ignore their materiality. We ignore that they have a life. They had a life before they came on the shelves of supermarket, because they are made of oil that has been extracted in the Middle East, which generates a lot of war and things like that. And they will have a life afterwards in the ocean as a soup of plastic, as degraded micro or nano debris. So it's again this dual mode of existence that characterizes all world objects. And we tend to ignore these dual modes of existence. And once they are, and in this case it's even more complicated, because as materials, they are not only made of carbon chains, which can be taken up by plankton and then fish and be recycled through the food chain, but they are also made of additives. To become plastics, there are many, many additives which are contaminants and which are also death, cause of death today. So this is the analogy with the nuclear waste. And plastic did not only colonize space, but they also colonized time. More precisely, they invented a special timescape, what I call timescape, temps paysage. Plastic commodities were key actors in the emergence of consumer society because they encouraged the proliferation of single-use items, plastic caps, plastic razors, and everything. Disposability is the secret of the commercial success of plastics, which allowed the mass production of objects intended for a single use. And far from being a defect, the ephemeral life of all these products has been valued as a guarantee of hygiene. It welcomed change with the proliferation of objects saturating domestic spaces and creating a new aesthetic, a new way of life focused on the present. The endless repetition of gestures of appropriation and trashing of objects. Roland Barthes, the French philosopher, famously argued in his mythology in the 1950s, he was really a precursor, that plastic dismantled the category of substance to give way to a metaphor of flow, of becoming. I quote, "So more than a substance, plastic is the very idea of infinite transformation. It is less a thing than a trace of a movement." The problem is that this quasi-immaterial trace of a movement, of a process, is obtained through the extraction and destruction of other traces, the traces of fossil fuel, the traces of prehistoric life, of 100 million years life, that accumulated in the underground to form the crude oil. So the archives of the history of life on Earth are the materialization of deep time. And when they are metabolized through the industrial system and consumer society, they will end up in the sediments and the living organism as archives of the century of petrocapitalism and consumerism. So they have a special regime of temporality, just as nuclear waste. And so to me, what is a major characteristic of world objects? First that we cannot live with them. You know? We cannot live with them, but they are extremely attractive. We depend on them. I will even say they are addictive. We are addicted to plastic. We will never be able to dispense with plastic. We will never be able to dispense with nuclear energy. They are here forever. They are here forever. They are now, they are inhabitants of the earth. We introduce them, and they are here forever. And we have really introduced them on the earth. And we are dependent on them, and we deny that. So we are all like climate deniers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Can we have a second microphone? Is that? Okay. Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture that showed for what we need philosophy to dismantle the fictions, the narrations in which we live, and to point to the denials with which we move through our environment, and to prove that philosophy is able to do this with great humor as well. Your lecture was able to visualize, make graspable abstract notions of philosophy, such as the pseudo-object or the world object, Michel Serre. Thank you for that. I'm sure that questions, probably many questions in the audience. I would maybe like to restrict the discussion now to maybe 2 questions, and then we have some time in the end also to have a discussion of all lectures, because we have 4 contributions during this panel. So are there questions? Is there a second microphone? Yes, please.
Thanks for your lecture. I'm also a chemist by origin, and studying a little bit of Latour and Serre, I came to Gabriel Tarde. It's a small question, because Gabriel Tarde did try this neo-modalology and also connects molecules with society. Do you think it makes sense in your context to integrate Tarde, or it's another game? Gabriel Tarde, who did this imitation thing and then later wrote about neo-modalology in sociology.
Yeah, sure. And Gabriel Tarde has been a major figure for Latour, you know. Yeah, sure. So this is something that we could explore. You know? The connection between the key idea is really to reconnect society with materiality. And so we cannot continue to live on the fiction of the age of dematerialization, which is also encouraged by internet. Internet is another world object which encourages the idea that we are going to dematerialize technology. That will never dematerialize. We deny our dependence on the materiality. So yes, it's a good.
Thank you.
Is there a second question? Or maybe from the panel? If not, I have one. What I really appreciate is that you work in the field of philosophy with going into the field with site visits, concrete case studies. Is that something, because we're speaking here about also research methodologies, is this something you would encourage students and researchers to do within the field of philosophy, to go on-site into the field, and what are your advices on how to do so?
Yeah, this is, I've been myself trying to train students to do what I call philosophie de terrain, meaning field philosophy, to always follow one material and to study the case and to follow its life trajectory and to see everything that is connected. And we see that materials form a network and that we are caught in this network. So it's pretty much this notion, follow up the materials. And the second point is also to connect that with design. I really admire Tim Ingold, that you may know, because he really elaborated on materials as processes through the notion of design. And I'm also working with a group in Berlin, which is called, it's a cluster of excellence cluster, which is called Active Matter. And so they really connect material scientists with designers and philosophers. And I think this interaction is really, because this is what I like that. I need the contact with people who are designing and materials because there is a recalcitrance, a resistance of matter that is important.
Thank you so much. I think we would like to continue now with the next contribution. The next lectures will be, we call them research reports. And the first will be given by Susanne Kriemann. Most of you know her very well, as she's professor for code and image here at ZKM Karlsruhe. Susanne Kriemann works in and with the medium of philosophy and its extensions or extensions. Photography, what did I say? Philosophy. Photography. Sorry. Still early. Photography was the word.
Nobody's
perfect. So she's exploring with the media landscapes as analog recording systems for human caused processes. So you will see there's a clear link between the issues addressed by Bernadette Bensaude-Vincent and Susanne Kriemann's work. Ecology is prevalent in her work, so she will share some of her work, which has been internationally exhibited and also published in multiple publications. So please, Susanne, thanks for sharing some of your projects.
Thank you so much. It's the end, so you have to go to the very beginning. It's the first slide. Okay, good. And I tend to speak long, and I don't want to crash our format. So first of all, thank you so much, Nina, for the introduction, and thank you so much for this inspiring talk, Bernadette Bensaude-Vincent. I have actually prepared a small introduction to how I work or how I perceive photography, and then I have 2 or 3 research protocols / research threads to share with you. I would like to start with quoting the people that I follow closely to make my work, which is practice-based. There is the following passage of the book Braiding Sweetgrass by scientist, professor and citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, Robin Wall-Kimmerer. And she has radically informed the way I work as much as have Anna Löwenhaupt singen, Bernadette, Panthéon-Sorbonne, and recently Ulemi's Unknown Language, and Daisy Hildyard's The Second Body. This is just to give you some references maybe for you too. So I am quoting now Robin Wall Kimmerer's text. A bay is a noun only if water is dead. It is concerning the way she uses language in comparison to the language of the Potawatomi nation. A bay is a noun only if water is dead. When bay is a noun, it is defined by humans, trapped between its shores and contained by the word bay. But the verb viiki vagama, to be a bay, releases the water from its bondage and lets it live. To be a bay holds the wonder that for this moment the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and flock of baby mergansers, because it could do otherwise, become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall, and there are verbs for that too. And this is the language that lets us speak of what wells up all around us. So in this, reading this, I try to, because Robin Wall Kimmerer's situation is very different from ours. Here she lives in a house surrounded by nature and lakes. But we are here in a media art university, but also my studio is much more trapped in notions of plastics, chemistries, and electricity, photo labs, and remediated landscapes of the German land. So I try to translate her text into photography and say, if the noun photograph is trapped in chemistry and contained by servers, to be a photograph would release it from bondages and lets it live, and also lets it disappear. This is really important for me, that the photograph is allowed to disappear. To be a photograph could hold the wonder that for a moment, sun and moon have decided to shelter their rays in silver particles, rare earth elements, and thiosulfates conversing with celluloids and polymers of all kinds. Because they could do otherwise, they'd be future fossils, smart weed, and data dust. And so now I would like to take you into my research that is titled Pechblende. It is concerned with a radioactive mineral Pechblende, which is the core for everything we know of nuclear waste, nuclear energy, nuclear bombs. And it has been mined in Thuringia and Saxony for many years, from 1945 to 1991. What you see here is a first autoradiograph that I have taken from a sample of pitchblende from a Thuringia mine, the mine of Johannes Georgenstadt, which I found in the American Museum of Natural History in New York in 2015, and I exposed it to film in the darkroom of the museum for 1 week. And this is what appeared. So in this kind of conversation with a mineral that is, as Bernadette already said, very inspiringly, it is beyond our notion of recognition. I also realized, as you can see here, the mineral doesn't recognize any surface, any sheet film. It is just going beyond the frame of what I exposed it to. And here we have the Karlsruhe nucleotide, where I would say, by reading through it and by seeing that in the decay chain of uranium-238, which is pitchblende, the thing itself changed many times. It's a kind of shapeshifter in time. In this kind of nucleotide, there are so many notions of time which are so unfamiliar to me, But there are also ones that I find somehow productive, like 27 minutes. So I will be talking much less today, but normally I talk 27 minutes. But then there's 3.8 days radon, or also only 19.9 minutes. And I try to kind of approach this incomprehensible timeline through my working weeks. So here I done this kind of pragmatically at the very beginning of the research. I did 4 weeks of exposure. Every week 1 sheet film has been taken out and developed, and this is what Pitchblende answered me. And here is also appearances in archives of Operation Crossroads, for example, where cesium-137 through the Trinity tests has been taken its traces in fish and algae. This is taken from the official record of Operation Crossroads, published in 1946 in the US. Okay, I don't know, it's not working. Ah, yeah, here. This is a double spread of a book of mine where I collaborated with other scientists. On the right you see the snake exposed 48 hours from found in Fukushima Daiichi region, and there is a kidney and a piece of muscle flesh. So these are also parts of archives, so I often collaborate with archival images, but also with other scientists, other artists that are in the field. And so what I want to share with you now is my approach to go through science, but also through poetry and literature, to make kind of visualization of how we understand this incomprehensible mineral that we are so dependent on through electricity and the future nuclear, or the current nuclear situation. And now I take you to a little field study that is a mountain. Underneath there is the 90% of pitchblende that cannot be used for nuclear fuels, nuclear rods, but that what is left over from mining operation. It is a photo taken in 2010 by the Wismut, where the Wismut has been the mining operation between 1946 and 1991. As Wismut SDAG, Soviet-German stake company, into a Wismut GmbH, which became a business for the remediation of uranium mining countries until 2045. I'm interested in this because I'm working with the timeline of the recent past and the recent future. And here you can see how we work with the scientists of the University of Jena by employing huge scanners. You see them on the right in the helicopter, or also by ultrasound images of landscapes where we define still radiating matter, which then we unearth and we go into labs and kind of find out how they are still radiating. Also, I want to show you this because of the notion of photography for me expands beyond the camera and the photo lab into the fluopen, for example, which only by shedding darkness to a plant can result in an analysis of the stress the plant is in when it's all of a sudden dark. And that reaction of the plant, fast or slow, constitutes if the plant has been irradiated. On these landscapes I work, it is not high radiation, it is actually the slow and violent radiation that will take very, very long time to disappear, because it is already present in the water, and it goes everywhere through water. Water is the medium of transport of these nucleates. And then what I did is just similar to the scientists. I took the 3 weeds that are known for accumulation of heavy metals and radionuclides to clean the soil. This is the wild carrot, oxtongue, and false chamomile. And by collaborating with a PhD scientist, we figured out that in these plants we have not only their amino acids and cellulose, but we also have a cocktail of an incredible amount of heavy metals and rare earth elements, and also radionuclides, that the biologist and I confirmed we could translate this actually as a future smartphone, which is not at all in its quantity. It is the quality of the things that are composed in these weeds. I like to think about it because I'm really tired of all the black boxes we have to deal with, or the aluminium shells we are working in. So I'd rather like to work on a planned computer in the future. Okay, so this is one of the works I've done. So often the works are, I call them like kind of mushrooms that are exiting from the web of research that I'm undertaking. I'm constantly, since over 10 years, doing radiographs in the Museum of Natural History in Berlin. At the moment I am doing an exposure until next Monday, which is just a constant work, a constant conversation with the pitch blender. But this work, for example, is a one moment where the plants have been still in their shapes, and later on, which is on the bottom of the image, we have milled them into pigments with Kriemann pigment, which is situated in the southern part of Germany and is a good collaborator of mine, into 4 different pigments, which I then used in an old technology of the heliogravure to print images of these very plants on the very mining sites with the pigment, and also inside of the pigment all the rare earth elements, heavy metals and uranium. So in this work, the image somehow talks back to you. It is also alive. In itself, the plant pigments, as we know from our studies, will not keep a lot of time because of the UV light. They will disappear over maybe 10, 20 years. When they kept in the cellars, they keep longer, of course. But the minerals that are inside, especially uranium 235, is gonna stay with the image, and it's also there in its invisibility then. I take you back to the site which I worked on. It shows you a field that has been heavily polluted in Thuringia. It's a former mining site, and in this kind of small row of images, I show you in the backwards timeline how pollution was made by releasing water and sulfides into the landscape, which are a product of the mining to separate the last and highly radioactive 10% of pitch blender that will be used for the fission products, and the other 90% that we cannot use somehow for what we need. And so I go quickly backwards. It is the 1960s. It is then when the remediation started in the 2008 with gigantic geotextiles drying up the polluted swamp into the place how I encountered it in 2013, which is already partly remediated but not yet approachable in any way, and it is now today. So also again, I'm going there, that's where I am on this place. I'm collecting sheep shit and sheep wool there in this image, because every of the former mining sites hosts slag heap sheep. So they are there to make it more fertile, and they eat the grass, and also the wild carrots and the oxtongue and false chamomile. And also I'm collecting all other kind of plants, and then I'm bringing them into the work. Here is an installation shot in Kunstfort 5000 curated by Zipporah elders, where I'm working with quite large-scale silks that take the ornaments of mycelium and other shapes from images from the archive that are there to remediate polluted landscapes. And I bring them together with plants and also an archive that I work on that is called the Library for Radioactive Afterlife, which is not only made with books but also with materials. Here, for example, wool from slag heap sheep, or also some different herbs. Now I'd quickly take you to what Bernadette already mentioned, the exhibition that is now on in Paris in the Musée d'Art Moderne, L'Âge Atomique. In itself, it's a gigantic exhibition that mainly focuses on three parts, which is the modern time where the discovery of the atom has been just extremely vital to Kandinsky, for example, but also Matisse, other artists. So they bring together these artists of the early modern times. Then they are having a large research section where everything that is the nuclear age, or the atomic age, is defining from 1945 with the tests, but also artists that works in this time. And they close it with a chapter of ecofeminist, where I'm very happy to be part of. And I think I was the only artist to make a work, which together with the scientist, Dr. Kriemann, who is co-curator of the show, we visited the area of Limousin in France. It is very different. It's a uranium mining area. France has extracted tons of uranium from its own land, and also in Niger. But it is different from my work with the Wismut, because the Wismut is somehow a closed chapter. In France, colonization for uranium mining is continuing. And that is something that we still work on to find the language for this. But so I show you a few images of our research. We have been gone to the former mining area, which is the way France deals with the uranium mining sites is flood them with water. So we call it waterlands of the Limousin. The Limousin is actually famous for the porcelain, the Limoges porcelain, and through the extraction of porcelain mineral they discovered uranium. So everything is linked, I think, just as Bernadette links plastics and the nuclear. It seems like there is so much more to link in the objects we use daily. Here we discover former sites. You can see Orano, the Geiger counter is active but not very active. Here is Cuvelli and I trying to find a language to what is around us. So this is one of the images I show in Paris. It's for me interesting because it depicts strata in its very sense. In this research, I focused actually on an idea that has been transported by the poet Lutz Seiler to me, where he talks about in his poem that it is the bones that the uranium is constituting. So the bones of the body of the miners, but also the bone of the landscape in the language of the miner is the name for uranium. So what happens with the landscape when its bones have been completely extracted? A landscape without the bone uranium. And my thesis in this work is, I would like to quote here Banu Kapil in her long poem, like prologue in Eulemy's unknown language. She asks, will the animals save us, or is it the plants that become the new adults of our time? And I'm almost finished. Yes, I'm really finished. But I just thought that, so I approached actually the plants that we have been taking to our research labs from this landscapes. We worked with CREAT, which is an independent research facility in France. I take the plants as skeletons, and I made photograms, but also I printed again with different matter, so that on the photographs themselves there's also the material that constituted the landscape, which is actually concrete from leftover mining sites, and also metals. So all these works, which you can't see here so well, but maybe here a little bit, have been also printed with concrete dust and also metal pigments. And also part of the work, and I'm soon quoting, because there is a lot of research going on and that links all the time different fields where we encounter nuclear in our present, in our surrounding, in our very close surrounding, and that is here through Röntgen. So I was able to do a Röntgen photo of the fan, the broom, and the lupine, which were the 3 plants I decided to work with in the Limousin. And yeah, so to end, this is how the work was displayed inside of a gigantic group exhibition. And so, yeah, that is the last autoradiograph that I just produced somehow together with the radioactive mineral. Actually, we were, I just want to finish with this because slowly I think it really starts talking to me, because I see fishes on this photo. I don't know how you feel, but I think it's a mother fish and a baby fish. And it's a mineral that has been found in 1750. It's the very first pitch blender ever named pitch blender by Klaproth, and so that's why I stopped with my talk.
Many thanks, Susanne Kriemann. Again, we have a short few minutes for 2 questions from the audience, if you like, or from the panel. Well, I do have a question that concerns time, and this maybe it goes to both of you. Because if you use or you bring into your works different time scales through the matter you use, through the materials you use. And Bernadette, you also spoke about the different times and also the time that is being denied or ignored, that is there within matter on the chemical and nuclear atomic scales. So, and you both link it to death also. So I was wondering whether time, I don't actually really know how to formulate this, but this link between the idea of death, pollution, the danger lying within these matter, and the notion of well, the different temporalities that we have here. How do you bring them together? Because death is then often linked to us humans with our time, notion of time and time span. So these seem to be very different scales in time that might link to the world object notion. This is also expanding the object from its confined presence, impact, to something beyond the human. Would you like to respond? Yeah.
I think so. Maybe death is not my main concern in these timelines, but it is actually the slow, violent approach, like that. That's not left on in its immediate. It's more tiring, let's say. So in Rob Nixon, Slow Violence and the Environmentalism of the Poor, he's talking a lot about really gigantic disasters that are unfolding then, after it took place, the big disaster. They are unfolding in rivers, and then they come into food chains, and then people are slowly affected by growing cancer or growing allergies or growing things, but they're not immediately left, and that's why they are so difficult to tackle for the narration of justice, I think. Because what happened with Chernobyl, I don't know, Silvia Federici, I think, published in her Fukushima Mon Amour that officially in Chernobyl only 10, 15 people passed away, and these are the direct lethal cases from, that's the fireman and the cameraman, Zschocke, and that is the people that were close in the site and were affected by this blast. But the real deaths are over millions, I think, and this is something that is also, for example, in the bodies of the miners that I often dialogue with, is not so recognized. So if they, for example, if a miner would smoke during the services for Wismut, they would rather constitute him dying of lung cancer from smoking than of lung cancer from mining pitch blender. And these are things that are very difficult, I think, for us to often understand, but therefore I would like to talk more in my work about the slow violence and how it is recognizably there too, and how we can recognizably document that slow violence.
Yeah, I would like to first to thank you for bringing to the fore all the various temporalities that are hidden, invisible in every object, whether it's natural like a plant or a technical object. And this is really the core of my own research, is really, and through photograph and the reflection on the temporalities involved in your practice of photography, we really managed to bring together how much we live in a cocktail of temporalities, and we pretend to be able to promote circular economy, whereas we are just playing with so many temporalities that we cannot really master. We cannot really control them. So this is for me the main message that is important. And the second one is this notion of slow violence. And it's, the slow violence is at the same time the rebirth, the renaissance. And this is really, there is a lot of poetry in that. It's like the phoenix coming out of the ashes. And because of these various, what I call regimes of temporality, there are some sedimented time, there are folded time, there are cyclic times, but there are many, many figures of time involved in everything that we do. And you artists, you can make them visible. That's incredible, you know. It's because it's been invisibilized by our technological civilization.
Thank you. So we will continue with the next research report. So welcome, Armin Linke. Many thanks for coming to Karlsruhe. You're also coming back to Karlsruhe as you have been a professor here at AfD some years ago. Armin Linke is an artist, also working with photography and film. And he's a professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, so the AdBK in Munich. He has been teaching, professor in many places, Karlsruhe, but also Urbino and other universities. He's also been an artist in residence at the KI in Florence. Armin Linke is exhibiting widely internationally. Maybe just to name one recent exhibition, this would be Image Capital, which we realized together with Estelle Blaschke. It's also an exhibition that is research-based. Happened at the Centre Pompidou in 2022-23. Also, Armin Linke's work has been published widely, and you have also realized yourselves like edited and produced publications. So thank you very much. Thank you for sharing here some of your research projects and work.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Susanne and Nina, for the invitation, and I'm super happy to be here and also touched. And I will now speak a little bit fast through 3-4 projects. Maybe I will not go deeper into the content of the project, but more say to try to think about if there is a methodology or what could be procedures. So maybe the first project is Prospecting Ocean that started 2016 and was commissioned and produced by TBA 21 Academy in collaboration with CNR ISMA, that is the Italian Oceanographical Institute, and it was developed together with Giulia Bruno and Giuseppe Ghelasi, so often my projects are collaborative. And the interesting thing that we could present it so in the laboratories, science laboratories of the Oceanographic Institute. So the exhibition was somehow also exposing the scientific institution itself. First part was a film. I will show some elements of it, and the focal point was the imminent threat of deep sea mining. Deep sea mining aims to extract minerals from the ocean floor, which are needed to produce phones and computers, but also technology based in renewable energies. The mining operations bring with them huge environmental and social risks, which are mostly deliberately ignored by profit-seeking companies. As a tipping point for oceanographic ecologists, prospecting oceans waves an intricate network of technocratic entanglement with industry, science, politics, and economics in a new frontier of deep sea excavation. So what you see here in the exhibition, we tried not to touch the walls of the institution, so in the sense that the laboratories itself were also depicted, and we tried to react also to the local history of Venice. What you see in the picture is a course from the International Depository of Oceanographic Geology that is in at Marum, in Kiel, and on the other side you have a core from the Venice Lagoon, in which you can really see the whole industrialization history of the chemicals, of the petrochemicals of the area. So again, bringing, and on the other side you have protesters of local communities in Papua New Guinea brought together. So you could really go through the different rooms and make an experience of different narratives. One of the works was an editing of from the archive of two German oceanographic institutions, Geomar and Marum, and I spent about, let's say, 2 weeks in the server rooms of Geomar, looking at, let's say, the operational pictures that the pilots, when they go mostly on one ship, Sonne, they produce to navigate. Mostly the, let's say, science time is divided between biologists and geologists. And what I also did is basically select images, choreograph them, but also then look into the logbooks of the scientists to understand what was their scientific goal. And what is also interesting that I'm allowed to show this work. I got the concession from Geomar to use the imagery for artistic purposes, but I'm allowed to show this work only in Europe. If I show it outside Europe, I need to ask the press office of Geomar, that is a German science institution financed with public money. And I think this shows also the knowledge from this institution of the, let's say, geopolitical content of the work. What we also tried to do was to ask the scientists of the institution of ISMA to react to the topics of the films by selecting books from their historical library that was in the same building. So again, try to find an engagement with the local institutions and the communities. And one of the main topics of the film is legal history about, let's say, sea management. And what you see here is Mare Liberum, an original legal textbook from 1909 from a young Dutch lawyer that at the time had to convince the Pope that the Dutch could reach Indonesia by traversing the Spanish and Portugal Sea. So he wrote this piece of legal literature that is also the base of liberalism, Mare Liberum, defining that the water surface and the water column should be free for navigation and also for fishing, also regarding the resources. While in 1980s the UNCLOS was developed when through sonar and photographic, let's say, sound technologies, new resources were identified. The question was how industrial countries could use these resources. So a new piece of legal instrument was developed that defined the ocean floor as a common human heritage of humanity. So this brought us to film at the International Seabed Authority in Kingston, where this law is implemented, and where since the 70s the legislation for the extraction of these resources is discussed. What you see here is the manganese nodule exposed there. What is also very interesting is that not only that there are also black smokers where the tectonic plates encounter themselves, and in these tectonic smokers different life forms live, mostly bacteria that can do chemiosynthesis, so transform toxical elements like methane or sulfur into sugar. And this is then very interesting also for the pharmaceutical or chemical industry to understand what are these processes and how could these living creatures be patented. But then the question now is, these living creatures, where do they live? Do they live in the water column with Hugo Grotius in 1969, or do they live on the ground or the floor with the UNCLOS? So basically now a new set of legal writing is in discussion. In fact, the Intergovernmental Conference on International Legally Binding Instruments under the United Nations Conventions for the Law of the Sea. There are already 3 meetings. They are now blocked also through the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But this is an element that is quite interesting. So the exhibition was presented 2018, and we planned also presentation at Columbia University, the architectural department. And in fact, it was then blocked because of Corona, but it will open hopefully on the 27th of February again. So, and for this exhibition that we look together with the curator Stephanie Hessler and Irene Sanhu into the archives of Lamont Earth Observatory, that is in fact part of Columbia University. So by chance there were an interesting connection, because there were a lot of legal lawyers from Columbia University writing the UNCLOS, but a lot of research was really done there at their department. So the idea was to look into different representation techniques, including sonar imagery. What you see here is Marie Tarp, that was very important woman oceanographer that was not allowed as a woman on the ships, but when the ship came back, the first computation by hand of the sonar technology that was, of course, a product of Cold War, and also made this first map together with Bruce Heason. In the first article were only signed by Bruce Heason, and then with history, her name came back again. And what was also interesting that they developed this first floor map of the oceans, mountains, and this illustration was made, by the way, by an artist and painter, I noted the name, but now I don't find it, from Innsbruck. And this map was very important in the 80s at the United Nations. It was distributed to the different representatives, so to arrive to the signature of the UNCLOS, and was financed by the United States, that then didn't sign the UNCLOS. Anyhow, I don't know. I have a little bit of videos, but maybe I skip them because of time. Maybe, yeah, sorry. Making sure a little bit. Okay, so what was interesting for me was also how do you represent legal instruments. I think a bit too big. So anyhow, what you see here is the office of Michael Lodge, that was at the time the lawyer, and in the meantime was also then the president of the International Seabed Authority. And for me it was interesting to look how do you write a piece of law, what is the language involved in it? This is a Dutch biologist that I met at the UNCLOS. She was part of the department doing the ecological assessment, and she, I don't know if we can hear the audio, I'm not sure. If not, we skip to the next. But what she's telling is explaining how these images, for example, to pick up a creature at 5,000 meters.
We worked in an environment of 4,000, 5,000 meters. We were working there like we would work on a mud flat. We were seeing what we were doing. And before that, we were working in the deep sea blind, actually, by lowering gravity from a ship. But now we walked on the seafloor like we would walk on a beach or a mud flat. But still you see, it's not perfect because you have these arms and you need to collect this very tiny, delicate specimen. So what just happened here is that a sponge was collected and then we lost it again. So also how much time it takes to collect one specimen, and then we know something about one sponge. And so while there are thousands of sponges, maybe you have two pilots which are driving both the ROV. They need to keep the ROV in place, and they need to steer these arms to collect these tiny sponges with a stalk as fine as a needle. So here he grabbed it again. So the trick is to get it here in the shelf. You see the shelf is being opened. So to get it in the box, and then it can be brought up. So it's like, not maybe, but it's nearly $1 million sponge. If you imagine how much it costs to go with the ship.
Yeah, so it was interesting that all this material that we used also for the editing was in these servers of Biomar, basically Titanic James Cameron production, and we could use it for the artwork. So the project, together with Giulia Bruno and Giuseppe Iazzi, brought us also to Papua New Guinea through in the Bismarck Sea, that was in fact also a German colony area, and through the association Brot for the Welt. It was quite interesting through the German Protestant church. They finance a lot of interesting ecological projects. We visited different communities that were under the risk of being affected by deep sea mining. It was Canadian company based in Australia, financed by Oman and Russian capital, Nautilus Minerals, that was trying to operate there. In fact, they went bankrupt, but now the concessions are being bought by another company. So this is Jenny from a village in New Ireland. That is so. We went with the boat and tried to film the reactions of the local communities.
What's the me Jenny? We were talking about them. Me was a grassroots married. Me married no place, but now me I'm system. Me can pull him card because me any money long fish. Now me get him card for this time. So here me stand up on the people happy. Me play like focus them. Me play no like him as a experimental civil mining. And I come now operate the yellow. So what are planning now?
I stopped here maybe, but for me what was interesting is that as we filmed in the UN Parliament, to me it was interesting to film again in the local community their own parliament. And also what is interesting, what she said is, well, now I'm a fisherman, I have a bank card. Basically, I had to enter new capitalist system. I'm also a producer, so it's my interest versus the interest of the local company. How is the government now defending my, let's say, emprendeurship? I don't know how to say. So the idea was also, and I was really very interested to see also the dialectic capabilities. It's also very interesting to think that in Papua New Guinea, in fact, there are 185 different languages spoken in different villages. Maybe I come to the next project. I don't know. Maybe I try to be very faster. Yeah. So. A project on the Anthropocene that started at HKW about 15 years ago with Anthropocene Observatory. So together with Anselm Frank, curator, and Anne-Sophie Ronskog and John Palmesino of Territorial Agency, we had the possibility to have let's say a project room where every 6 months we would present fieldworks visiting different institutions doing research on climate change, and this brought them also, for example, to a certain point to identify a group of scientists that called themselves Anthropocene Working Group, and I find out that they would meet only on Skype, and so we proposed to Ben Scherer of the HKW to invite them, because I wanted to film them, but they were diffused around the world, and so I thought maybe it's more interesting to bring them here. And so by the idea that we could document something, we created something maybe real, that to bring them, have the institution bring them to Berlin, and then from this project, of course, I began to try to understand. I was simply curious, how would they work, what were the process, what they would be discussing, and there was then another meeting in Mainz where there was also sorry? Yeah, anyhow, we kind of try to understand how they work. Then the installation had a development, and was invited in Matera, that is a town in the south of Italy, to work on the area. It's an interesting area where also Pasolini filmed his film on the Vangelo di San Matteo, where basically the community were living in caves, and of course after the Second World War this was considered the shame of Europe. So with the Marshall Plan, all the people were moved into new towns, but it was also the place where the first, let's say, sedentary communities were living in Italy. say the place where the Holocene also started, and it was interesting then we discussing with the museal institutions, we had the permission to make the exhibition in the deposit of the Archaeological Museum of Matera, and we constructed this system of glasses, and so brought, let's say, the topics of the Anthropocene in the context of the museum where the Holocene were exposed. So here you have the 2 degrees graphic of Will Stephen brought together, other direction, with the objects of the Holocene of the first communities of Matera. And of course we looked also in the photographic archives of the Geological Museum, looking at the first practice of agriculture, or bringing together with the photography and with the material the painting of Carlo Levi, that you might know, the beautiful book Cristo si è fermato a Emboli, because also this area was, let's say, the colonization region of Italy, where also people were confined during fascism, and we were also looking then, doing research on oil extraction, because this is also the area where AdBK extracts oil, or during the fascist regime, the agriculture was transformed through technological appliances. There was also another room where we presented a film, and we also created a timeline where then the public could go deeper in researching into the topics of the film. And what was also very important was to trying to create visiting experiences for schools of the region. So we had more than 500 schools visiting the exhibition, and we had a kind of logbook where there were materials from the exhibition, and student classes were invited to edit their own book and really, let's say, do their own exhibition and do their own publication. So we had no publication. Sorry, 2 minutes. Perfect. And this also then brought to another project, Haus der Kunst, where it was really more a commission. It was also during Corona, because then Haus der Kunst gave the created a research group. So invited the Anthropocene working group, a group of scientists, mostly geologists and biologists and chemists, to look into 12 cores. So it was interesting that, let's say, art or cultural institution would finance scientists together with the Max Planck Institute for Art, for Science History. And so, being during Corona, we could not visit the laboratories, but we asked the scientists to create the logbooks, to create images, and we had then a kind of interaction studio together. It's a project with Julia Bruno, that is a biologist, but also Linda van Dersen, that is a graphic designer. So we created this studio at HKW, where we asked the scientists to send in material, but also to comment it graphically and to tell us stories. And of course, we were also telling, but we're also really interested in your boring part. So an Excel list. Look at an Excel list exactly like we look now at Humboldt making drawings of climate change, only that after 200 years we think these drawings are super poetical, but we think an Excel list is also super poetical. So we created this kind of metadata system with Linda, in which all this layering of information are brought together, and then the question was how to bring this in the exhibition site of the HKW, using this kind of grid like archaeologists would do. I skip maybe very fastly. I have one more image capital, but maybe I stop, I don't know. Yeah. for the next presentation. Okay, maybe there is a website of image capture, maybe so. There is also to create an exhibition, but with the STEL, it is a Museum of Science. We also created a website that tries to be a digital publication, which we invite also now. We try also to invite students to publish also their work. So again, a collective idea of opening up research networks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Armin Linke, for sharing some of the wealth of your work and material. Are there questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you very much. I was very curious at the moment you showed us the school kids in Matera, the classes coming to use the materials that you collect as an artist. It again opens up another time cycle for me, maybe. But what could you learn for yourself, maybe, from what they created with the materials that you have been collected, together with artists, scientists that has been collecting materials before?
Well, together with Linda van Dorsen, we created also publications. We had no money for the publication, but the concept that we developed with Linda was that we would say each element of the exhibition would have an A4 label, and then collecting all the labels of the more, let's say, we had about 700 objects, images, materials. We could create a PDF that is downloadable at the moment, so a digital publication. And this, let's say, selection of the works from the visitors is also part of this publication. And I think that maybe this idea to invite also local communities is important because, in fact, as I said, in Basilicata there is the extraction sites of oil, and there is also pollution issues. It was also interesting that in Italy there are also no, at the moment there is no central atomic depository, so and of course when a site was proposed, Basilicata was proposed, so again this region, and there was a very strong opposition of the local communities, and this still resonates, because there is still the risk that as this region was until now very, let's say, isolated, I mean, the contrary now, the absurdity is now that this very cave in Matera are now the top Condé Nast traveler Airbnb residency. So it's also very interesting that in 50 years from the shame of Europe, this is transformed in the next James Bond movie resort. So all these contradictions are there, and I think the communities there have to live with this contradiction, to be, let's say, from the place where during fascism all the resistance war was isolated, as it was really considered the most isolated place, to being now this strange. So I think that to create this workshop was also a way to discuss about these issues.
So last short question, short answer.
I like that yesterday speculation was mentioned, and maybe there's a chance, because after Anthropocene there was this new alphabet presented at Curie with videos by Alexander Kluge, and I think he's speculating. So in your case, like Kirchhoff's Mundus Subterraneus, did you include some speculation visions, or was it more on rationality and sciences? Kluge incited some Kabbalah, you remember?
Yeah. So let's say that in Matera we had more the possibility to find the connections, and also maybe go beyond, let's say, these ethnographical definition of the Anthropocene, and to look what are local relations still looking at technology. So we went from telespazio, that where all the images for European agriculture are connected, because to get European funding for agriculture, you have to demonstrate that you have to photograph at least, every nation has to photograph at least 4% of its agricultural production, and you have to show that you do also programs for wildlife, and this is all demonstrated by photography. So, and this practice is taking place also in this area to historical, archaeological, agricultural practice. So we were trying to combine different practice and also show how traditional local practice are as important in this value of knowledge, and they together construct our common knowledge. So this was a tentative to bring these different realities together and to treat them unhierarchically.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will now come to the last presentation of this panel, which will be given by Lorenz, who's the head of the Hertzlab at ZKM here. She comes from theater studies and study of American literature, literary history, and she has been a lecturer and also working as a dramaturg. She's also a co-founder and founding member of hackerspaces and closely embedded in the hacking community. So thank you for speaking about the Hertzlab and presenting some views on what you plan to do, what you have done, and what the future will be.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I will try to be very concise, because we are already over time. But before I begin, I brought a literature tip for you, because I just returned from South Korea and I witnessed the opposition protests in Seoul and also the very overwhelming police force that accompanied them. And I got recommended this book. It's called Ready-Made Bodhisattva, and it's the first anthology of South Korean science fiction. And I think if you want to look at how a society imagines its future, it doesn't hurt to look at its science fiction. And it also includes a short essay by Sang-Yoon Park, who's one of the editors here. This is a brief history of South Korean science fiction fandom. So this is a hot literature tip. The book is from 2019, and as far as I know, it's the first English-speaking compendium of South Korean science fiction. So I joined the ZKM in January, and before that I spent 20 years in theater. So I learned quite a lot about artistic research in the past year, and it is a relatively new field. And as a relatively new field, it has a lot of stakeholders and a lot of approaches and a lot of desired outcomes, not incomes. And I talked a lot with scientists, because art science from scientific perspective, artistic projects from scientific perspective, that has been gaining some traction in the past years, and it has been ever gaining more favor in the scientific community, because most research grants nowadays come with the condition of communication of the project and of the findings towards the general public, which means that art and artistic residencies and artistic research, this is something that the scientific community is really looking forward to collaborating with as scientific communication. And this can be chosen in the research grant as one of the outlets of communication of scientific findings. And this specific way of doing artistic research is science-driven. So the scientists curate the exhibitions, they select the residency, and they communicate their findings with the artistic community, which then results maybe in a work. And the artistic research here means that artists are included in the project as findings and methodology is shared with them, and the artist does the same research alongside the scientist in the scientific field and creates an art piece that may or may not communicate what the artist has learned. And it does have some advantages, this approach. Art can, if it is invited on eye level, it can ask questions that science cannot. It can think outside of the box of the rigid methodology that science needs to adhere to, and it can be also naive in the best possible way. It can just open up the field. And it is also possible that art can communicate science because it is aesthetic, it is sensual. It does not need footnotes. You can comprehend it on a whole different level than you can comprehend science, and this makes it approachable for a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different audiences. But this approach also has some disadvantages. And the disadvantages are, if it comes from science, the eye level is not always a given, and the art can, the learnings of the artist does not always translate into the work. How do you communicate quantum flux? It is an abstract topic. How do you communicate this into art, and how do you communicate this into an audience, a general public? And also, sometimes the research topic isn't appropriate or useful to an artistic approach because it is so abstract that it needs the intellectual approach. So not all fields can be turned into art. And also artists sometimes don't think of themselves as mediators. Art does not need to explain. Well, at least not all the time. And artistic research in media art is a twofold process because you have, on the one hand, you have the component of the technology, and on the other hand, you have the component of art, society, the topical. And a technology that is new, such as AI, such as quantum technology, well, not new in a time frame sense, but new as a field of artistic practice. It has to be played with and it has to be explored in order to understand it and in order to create something with it. It is a study of material. It is a study of tools. And this study has to be made, and this study has to be, this is a research that is relevant to art in order to master a new material for artistic creation. And this strand of artistic research, it needs teachers, and it needs structure, and it needs the hardware possible so the learning curve can profit from already available knowledge. This is purely skill transfer. And the other strain, the other component of artistic research is the topical. And if the topical is done for purely aesthetic reasons, artistic research stops at the technologically level. Look at what I can do with AI. Look at what I can do with light. Look at the great thing I did. This is something, it can go further. Artistic research can go further and think about what media and technology might mean for the future of society and how scientific discovery changes the way we live, how to make sense of a world we feel ever more powerless in. Because mostly we do not understand the inner workings of technology anymore. We cannot repair our own cars because they are now more software than hardware. We cannot understand how AI works because it's a black box. There's a lot of things, it's not tangible anymore. And making sense of this is also something that artistic research is able to help with. And this kind of research might not be driven from science, but it is driven from art. It's a different perspective. It's driven from the artistic perspective.
And it does call on science, it calls on other forms of research as well, but it claims a place as of its own. It does not need to look up to science, but it really stands very in its own middle. And the work it creates inspires understanding beyond pure aesthetics in the audience it reaches. So it does create some sort of understanding. It does not merely translate the research, but makes discovery on its own. Discoveries only artists are able to make through their practice. And this is kind of the basis of what we think the Hertzlab and the artistic research practice can offer in this field of artistic research. We are, as a Center for Art and Media, we have a large expertise in knowledge production, in archive, in research methodology, but we can also look towards the future. We can also see how art and technology can shape what society looks like. And we need to talk about this. We need to talk about what a society looks like that has artificial intelligence in it. What do we want it to do? What do we not want it to do? And these are all questions that art can help answer. And so what we at Hertzlab do is also twofold. We support artists in learning new technology. We support them in upskilling, in learning about technology, and what potential it has for their artistic practice. And we learn about it ourselves as well through production, because we need to know how a technology works in order to know how to make it do what we want it to say. And we structure our work thematically into 6 broad themes and cluster our artistic residencies that we invite and our own work into these themes, because that makes it easier for artists to latch onto knowledge that has been produced in Hertzlab before and that can then be given to other generation of artists, because we think in the scientific community it is good practice to share your findings, to discuss it in a very transparent way. In art that might happen, but not in a structured way, but in artistic research this also needs to happen, so that you don't have to start from zero. And our 6 themes that we cluster our work around are called Life Cycles, Connects, A Commons World, Health and Well-being, Post-Human Earth, and Fellow Futures. And we think these are very broad topics. Life Cycles, for example, deals with the topic that we need to come away from a linear narrative. And I know this goes a bit against what you said before, that this theme of cycle is a sham, that there is forever chemicals and forever materials. But I think it's important to look at life that can be different than just the linear I am born, I live, and I die narrative. And so, with all the other topics, they're very broad topics of what we want to ask, the questions that will be relevant or are still relevant now, but will be relevant in 100 years. How do we connect with each other if all our connection is mediated through technology? How will we work in a world that is most dominated by private interest, and how do we create a very sustainable commons and common knowledge? How do we treat the topic of health and well-being in a world that looks at well-being as self-optimization? How will we, what music do robots make if there is no human audience to listen to it? And also, what will future narratives look like from perspectives that are not Western? And these are the topics that we decided to explore, and we have also in Hertzlab carved out a physical space for us to meet, because it is very important that we share ideas, that we come together, and that all of the disciplines can have a place to meet, and also with the general audience, because artistic research
is mostly invisible until you show it. It's exploration. It does not work until it does. And I think it's important to show the process as well, to show the failing, to show what didn't work, what avenues we explored that did not lead to anything. This is not a very glamorous way of showing great exhibitions or great findings, but it is also necessary so other artists know what might not work or what we have explored under circumstances and what didn't work. And so this is how we try to make it a bit more transparent what we do. And we have, just as examples how we organize it, we had 2 recent artistic research projects. One was by creative technologist Sarah Selby. She's from London, and we had her together with the Goethe Institute. It was called Studio Quantum, and Sarah looked at she explored artistic perspectives on quantum technology, which is a very abstract field. Quantum technology right now is not, you cannot access quantum computers directly, only through cloud. It is a very, let's say it's a physics project at the moment. So it's not readily available, but it will be. And it will become a very interesting field, not only for technology and for science, but also for art. And to explore this technology is an interesting step in finding out how this technology might shape us. And so we invited her for an artist residency that did not have a specific outcome. She had a showcase instead of her findings and what she learned. And the other artistic research project that we invited was a sound studies artist. Her name was Eugene Chen, and she is a Taiwanese artist, and she explored she looked at the materiality of water, and because her exploration was a sonic exploration into the nature of Taiwan, which is an island, as a cybernetic sea monster, because she said Taiwan as the workshop of the world is a very high technological society, but it is also something as an island embedded in this whole natural environment. It is also something of a sea monster, and she explored this theme in the Kubus. And these are 2 recent projects that we did. And I'm closing my remarks now, but I'm hoping that through the neighborhood with the HFG and through all the projects that might arise in the future, our very specific strain of what artistic research might be and what practice-based research might be in an economy such as this. I'm really looking forward to inventing, because this is a young field. We can still make a mark, and we can still see what artistic research is for us, and I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tina Lorenz, for sharing some your views on this field. And I think some of what you mentioned opens up connections to research already happening also at HFG, so I think there's a lot of potential for exchange. I would like to, even though we are over time, still use the chance for a short conversation between the panelists, and I would like to just throw 2 very short questions into the round of the panelists, and doing that I pick up one keyword from your presentation, Tina, and this is footnotes, because we have, of course, here strong positions for artistic research on the panel. I find it interesting how you use footnotes and integrate them into your work. I think Armin with the work on the deep sea mining, we have even material like objects as footnotes in an exhibition, and I would like to hear a bit more about this. And then the other topic is The denial, Bernadette, you spoke about our denial of the materiality of our surroundings. And what occurred to me also during Armin's and your presentation is that it's not only actually the materiality we are denying, but from within this capitalist system we're in, we're still denying also the finances, the financials of this system. So when you explained the care and materiality of the hug and the processing or dealing with nuclear waste or the money going into deep sea mining, this is also something that doesn't show up on the energy bills and yes, the products.
Okay, thank you. Footnotes, I often call them annotations because I feel it's a little bit more open. And I use images, also my own images, as footnotes sometimes when the research becomes the main narrative. I feel that it's all, I mean, there is no distinction for me in hierarchy. Footnotes often when I read books are my first go-through. I look at the bibliography and at the footnotes and the references, and then I start diving into the book. Because I often have to check in which system this publication has been published and is operating, and with which logic, which is quite often, looking which actual references are given, which actual footnotes are in the book, and if these references are part of the universe I would like to work in, or if they're representing a universe that I feel is not productive. Exactly when we talk about climate change and its complexity.
Well, I think the notion of footnotes is really important, because footnotes is really what we don't want to include in the grand narrative. So we put them in the periphery of the main grand narrative. And this is where the good research questions lie, in the footnotes. So I'm really for footnotes, and in this respect, I'm against Michel Serres, my mentor, who protested against academic work and refused to include footnotes in his own work. And he recommended that we should get rid of footnotes. And I make the case for footnotes, because as you mentioned, footnotes is really where the underlying message lies.
Yeah, and maybe I think for example, in exhibition, the footnotes creates also a dialectic with the artwork. No, I say, okay, I'm the artwork, I'm the photographer, worse. No, I frame things, and I have always to cut and frame things and put things away, and I say, okay, but it doesn't work like this. I have to show the context, and so I need the footnotes. And this creates, maybe when you bring it in a publication or in an exhibition, it creates the dialectic. So I think it's absolutely necessary. And because then it's also an experience who can look at the, speaking as a photographer, who can look at the picture. Yeah. So you work against yourself and you declare, well, in fact, this picture should be a starting point for a discussion. It should not be my way to see it, but it should be more a tool. And the art is not in the picture, but is in the process that starts thanks to the picture taking. We speak about photography.
Thank you. Do you still want to comment on the costs that are denied? Bernadette? Okay.
I'm not absolutely comfortable with the idea of denial. And why? Because denial suggests that you know where truth is and you deny it. Okay? So that's why I just use denial, but I'm not really sure that it's the correct way to put it. And because I'm not sure that we know exactly where truth is, and it's not that simple, you know. So I use the term denial, and I think that using the term climate denialist is also thinking that we know where reality is, and we know that, well, it's more complicated, more complex. And so that's why I don't want to comment further.
Thank you very much. I think this is quite a good end. And I think we kind of can hand over to the next panel after a short, now shorter lunch break, with having kind of raised the question of how to work with archives, how to collaborate, the importance of going on site into the field, and the importance of footnotes and of sharing your research. So thank you very much. We will have a 3/4 of an hour lunch break, and then we continue with the next panel. Thank you so much.